taking a look at Karelia 44 from MMP. I set this up and went through a couple turns just to get a sense of what this is all about. I find games about like World War II and Finland really interesting. Red Winter, one of my favorite GMT hex and counter games. So anyways, I thought I would just do a quick overview to the game. It's really interesting. And it's standard combat series, so pretty simple to get into. Rules are, just a couple of pages of game-specific rules, and then you're off. Basically chronicles the Russian invasion, the Soviet invasion of Finland in the continuation war. They are trying to make it all the way up there to Viipuri. And so the situation kind of evolves. This is the starting setup. You've got two Russian armies here, and then the ones with the stripes here. The ones with the stripes, they're trying to basically, there's essentially three axes of advance in this game. So the smaller army here in the east, they basically are going to be trying to make a push up to the north. You can see victory point hexes in Finland with actually some bigger ones. Yeah, so we got bigger ones here, and then Viipuri itself is actually eight points if you can control both hexes. Basically, the game doesn't have a turn track. It's got a variable ending, and that's based on Stalin's patience with the attack. Russians basically have to go all out to begin with, because there's a 50-50 chance every turn that Stalin's patience will run out. This track will reduce at the beginning of every turn, and if it ever gets to game over, you immediately end the game and score points based on victory point hex control. So it's got a really tense kind of pacing to it. Russians want to throw as much as they can, and for the Finnish defense, you can see that they don't have a lot of units. They've got basically, some tiny engineering units, some bicycle companies, or not companies, excuse me. But essentially, they're strung out along this line of fortifications, and the map is developed in such a way that you can see here this gray line beneath these counters. That's sort of the first line of defense. And then they've got another one they can retreat to here that kind of spans the map. This does things like double their defense value in combat, makes it really hard to dislodge. And then there's a third one here way in the north that goes from Viipuri up here all the way across the northern end of the map. So essentially what you're looking at is basically the Finns trying to hold on through Soviet attacks, and the Soviets have the ability to do huge artillery barrages once every 3 turns, and they start the game ready for one. And so they want to hang on as long as they can, delay, fall back to the next line, and then hopefully get some reinforcements. In the game I was playing last, the Finns, whose stacks of reinforcements, you can see one up here as well, did not get any, but they ended up holding their own pretty well. So yeah, what else? I'll probably think of some other stuff as we go, and I'll check in with a couple turns ahead just to see kind of how it unfolds. But it's really quick playing, fast playing, a lot of artillery, and some really interesting mechanics with this timer variable ending mechanism, which has the Soviets on their feet essentially the whole game. So yeah, so pretty eventful first turn. The Soviets absolutely hammered the Finns all along this line. I think they broke through at every major victory point. Hex here, 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 and here. And so the Finns are basically in full retreat. You can see most of them have dropped back to the second defensive line on the map. By taking those points, I did increase the patience track, which gives me another potential turn to work with in the game for the Soviets. I mean, it was basically a prepared offensive, which one of the mechanics the Soviets have to break through some of these defensive lines is when they declare a prepared offensive, they get a column shift right on the combat table. They can also declare units. So these are exploit units here with the yellow. They can declare units that don't have exploit capability to be what's called a second wave using these markers down here. And you're able to use the exploit phase for stacks that you mark as second wave. So as you can see, I was able to, especially up here, I was able to get some of these infantry stacks that had been behind the front through this narrow passage, exploited up along this road, chasing these Jaegers, and sort of making a run for this here, and hopefully trying to get a breakthrough to get into the northeastern part of Karelia. Yeah, it was pretty bad. Down here, you can see that some tank units have moved up from behind the front up the roads to try and gain control of those. This one actually outran down here to this line, which is very lightly defended right now, and it's going to be challenging for the Finns to kind of hold this. You can see that some units that started... let's focus there. You can see that some units that started up here, they are... on their way to try and relieve this situation, but I think it is going to be probably a turn or two before the Soviets are able to make their way up these roads and get in position to attack these fortified positions. This hex in particular is very lightly held. I think there's only 4 defense strength there, so you can see some Soviet Guard infantry who were able to use the second wave exploit to get up the road. Some of these units here, they were actually along this line. They actually had to leave this infantry unit behind. They're in full retreat. This one actually got hit really hard. It's a step loss marker under there. And they're trying to reform here. There's a river crossing that I think they're going to try and hold. Some artillery support came down. So we're going to see if we can hold that and delay this advance. Because this crossroads here is actually very critical. The Soviets essentially have to make a decision about which axis they're going to approach, whether they go north here or they go west here. And so it's really tough with all this wooded terrain. In fact, the whole map, very tough for mechanized, motorized units with the yellow symbol to move between these. So really, I've decided as the Soviets that I'm going to make this push up here, try and push them off, try and take control of this crossroads, and then rejoin the 2 advancing wings of this army together, and be able to kind of shuttle force where I need to as I make preparations to break through this second line. A couple other things with the Finns. You've got some Estonian volunteers coming from the north. They're trying to shore up this position. Some Jaegers who were down by this lake who are in full flight. They were able to escape. One of the cool things about this game is it's very asymmetric. So the Soviets pretty much function standard SCS style in terms of phases, turn phases, movement, exploit, all that kind of stuff. But the Finns in this game are extremely mobile. They actually have a lot of opportunities to move out of phase. And there's actually a phase on the Soviet turn called the Finnish reaction phase. Any Finnish unit that is not in an enemy zone of control can actually move during that phase in response to Soviet positioning. Which is actually really huge. It makes them very mobile, and that is in addition to the move that they're going to get on their upcoming turn. So they're able to cover a lot of ground. For example, this stack here of Jaegers, I think there's a tank unit under there as well. They were able to escape out from the north shore of this lake in the reaction phase, and they're going to get to move again and reposition. And so a bunch of the infantry that was stationed over here to prevent a flank, they actually got, this one in particular got caught out trying to cross this river. And so he's gonna have enough movement this turn, hopefully, to be able to get through here, so he's not cut off. What else can I tell you? One of the other challenge for the Finns is that their artillery, because of these axes of advance and the amount of coverage they have to put across these defensive positions to prevent flanks, it's really important where you position your artillery. Artillery can also fire during the movement phase. They don't have a dedicated barrage phase like the Russians do. So, for example, here, let's find the stack. This stack here, actually this artillery unit, there's 2 artillery units there. They actually, before they moved in the reaction phase, they were actually able to make an attack on this stack, and they actually caused a step loss with their barrage, and then they were able to move out. So playing the Finns is actually really fun because they have a lot of flexibility in terms of moving. They can move, fire, move, and any artillery like this one here that have exploit abilities can also do that in the exploit phase in addition to their own turn. So it's a lot of hit and run. They feel really fluid. They're there, they're gone. It's very cool. And then I guess the final thing I'll touch on real quick before we continue is these ghost markers here. These are basically where units that are in this fortified line where zones of control would enter, and all these do is they prevent the Soviets from moving or attacking into those hexes, so that they essentially allows the Finnish troops to man a line without having to have a unit in every hex. And so kind of putting these in a way that prevents the Soviets from bringing combat power to bear on some of these hexes where there's multiple ways to attack is part of the puzzle. So you can see here that, you know, the Finns, they kind of see that there's a lot of combat potential in this area that's going to make its way up this road. So they're sort of reinforcing heavily along here. And I expect at the end of the Finnish turn, you'll see sort of a line of defense here, in addition, backing up this line of defense across this river line here. So that is the state of things now. And we'll see if the Finns get reinforcements. One quick correction I need to make. This tank unit that I said had gotten this far forward, actually could not have gotten that far forward. Supply rules in this game, fairly lightweight. As long as you can trace to a map edge, basically through any type of terrain, you're good. For the Soviets, they have headquarters units, and these headquarters units correspond to each army. So this one, 21st Army here, and then the 23rd Army headquarters here, their supply range is listed as the first number. So this guy's got a 12 hex supply range, and I believe that this hex here is just out of range of that. So I backed the tanks up to where they actually should be so that they can still be supplied. But otherwise, finished turn. So situation down here, you can see that a huge traffic jam along these roads and rail lines as the Soviets try and move in and move up to the next sort of defensive hex. I kind of changed my plan halfway through the turn. Forgot that this river crossing is really going to have attacker strength across, so I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get in position to spot for the next major barrage I'm gonna have in a couple turns, and move some infantry up, but I am gonna take a lot of artillery fire in the meantime, so I didn't want to lose a bunch of these stacks potentially to that. And the same is true over here. They've got big artillery strength here that they can start pounding some of these units with, but you know, that's just the price you have to pay. I'm thinking that if I can get a breakthrough at one of these two hexes, it's really going to hurt because it is wide open all the way up to the top of the map up there. So I did launch one attack here with some air power with this tank group, and I did do a step loss, but I was not able to take the hex, and I took a loss myself, but that probably next turn will go. Depends on how quick these reinforcements can get down here. This is by far Finland's biggest stack. It is a big tank and a couple Jaegers under there. That is definitely made for counterattacking, and I positioned them such on the line on this road here, so that they could take advantage of any from the rear of any potential breakthroughs or anything that could have happened here. So really just kind of a setup turn. The Finns fell back, reinforced some of these points, but they're weak here, and I don't know that this infantry should be able to get there in time. We'll see if they can make it. Up here, again, just another shuffling up the road. These Finnish units and this one here, they sort of took refuge into the swamp, so they didn't get overrun on their turn. They're going to try and make it back to their lines. The supply situation here is a little tenuous with this infantry unit, so, you know, maybe if I feel like these guys are given up for dead, they might come in and do sort of a pincer attack on this unit to try and cut supply, but it probably wouldn't go well for them. Too terribly well for them. It's a straight 1-to-1 attack. And then up here, didn't do any attacks. These are really heavily defended hexes with double defense strength, so that's going to have to wait until I get my massive barrage in a couple turns with the Soviets. But in the meantime, we're setting up to put as much attack power to bear on these hexes as we possibly can to get ready for that. And again, another huge artillery group here for the Finns that can just pound those stacks until that occurs. The other notable thing, Soviet turn, Stalin didn't do the patience roll well. He began to lose patience with the attack, so I moved down from 4 to 3, and I didn't roll well for Soviet air power this turn. If I had, I probably would have launched more attacks at some of these hexes just to get some movement going. But as it is, this is kind of where we're at the end of the second Soviet turn, and after the Finns have defended, they're beginning to move down some more units to kind of shore up some of these positions that seem like they might fall on the next turn. And the Finns did not get any reinforcements this turn, unfortunately. Kind of an interesting situation developing here on the Finnish turn. They have moved in. They were able to get some reinforcements into some of these critical hexes. thankfully. But in the exploitation phase on the Soviet last turn, this light tank stack, who's DG'd now, they were actually able to find a soft spot in this line and kind of pry their way in there and threaten the Finnish artillery in the rear. And so this allowed the Finnish Panzer assault gun and Jaegers underneath there to come down and do an overrun in the Finnish reaction phase against this stack, who was backing them up. Did a step loss here and didn't take any themselves and forced these guys to retreat, which backed off this attack that I was setting up for here with the Soviets. And then in the Finns' turn, they moved their artillery back, did an artillery barrage. That's an example of the flexibility of Finnish artillery. They can move and fire, or fire and then move. And they actually managed to do a step loss here and disorganize this stack. So you've got two light armored units underneath there that are now half strength for DG and kind of sitting out in the open. So they might be open for a counterattack here. The other thing I'll mention real fast is that the Finns finally got their first reinforcements. That's going to do two things. It's going to give them some much needed backup, but it also means that the Kolmi group has arrived, who's this stack, and that is going to massively improve the Finnish air rolls, which should slow down Soviet air power coming up. And so that was good timing for the Finns. Yeah, more soon. Couple turns ahead now. The Finns have been doing a really great job of bogging down the Soviet offensives. The second prepared offensive did not go well for the Soviets. The bombardments, for the most part, failed across this line. And the attacks, also, the dice were not friendly to the attacks. So the Soviets have had a hard time making progress here. They've been really bogged down. They did finally, on this last turn, manage to make a breakthrough here. And sort of begin this flank. The Finnish artillery are in the process of pulling back, although this mobile stack here made an overrun and did a loss. And then they brought down some units from this particular front here to come potentially threaten behind. This armored stack just did an overrun, managed to push back in this swampy terrain, this armor unit here, holding that line. And then surprisingly, actually, with the minimal forces the Soviets had here, they were able to cross this river, take this hex, and start to push up. And so this line here is now going to have to make some decisions. They've already moved the artillery back, you can see. They're going to have to make some decisions about how to defend that or whether they just give it up. Over in the east, again, Finns doing a really good job bogging the Soviet offensive down. They've got a lot of defensive factors in these two critical road hexes and their fortified hexes. The Soviets did manage to make some progress to start to flank around. You can see them kind of start to form up. There's actually nothing up here, so once this defense starts to crumble, I think we're going to have the Finns fall back up these roads. This is mostly artillery down in here. The infantry and some armor units here, really, they've taken a lot of losses from artillery bombardment, from failed attacks. And then the other big consideration here is that the Stalin's patience track, unlucky roll to bring that down to 2. Thankfully, last turn, it did not go down again, but I did use one of the game's mechanisms to climb this up a point so that I wasn't hovering at 1 and in danger of the game ending, and that was to remove 24 steps of units from the map, mostly artillery, although you can see some infantry and some weak infantry in here, and a mobile artillery group over there. So that kind of also didn't help, but in order to keep the game going, had to do it. I'm now throwing a lot of my guards units at fortified positions because the next thing that I can do to keep this from moving down, or excuse me, to move it up 1, is to remove all Soviet guard units. And so I'm trying to stave that off for as long as possible, and I'm trying to break these positions, because once I do that, the guards units are not going to be as needed anymore. So Finns are up next. They are probably going to make some minor adjustments, but continue to try and hold at least one more turn, and hopefully the clock will start to run out on the next Soviet turn. All right, so pretty successful turn for the Soviets, all things considered. Let's start up here. We're not able to break through there, but I was able to make an assault across this river line, take out that unit thanks to some good artillery strikes. Now he's going to be able to come up and around and threaten this artillery, and hopefully put the pressure on these defenders. Got some reinforcements coming up the road. Over here, still holding strong. This stack here is an armor stack that managed to blow through their defenders. And they got close in exploit phase to this hex because I need to take it next turn, and I need a spotter for artillery. They got bombarded. Surrounding this hex here, very lightly defended. Well, not super lightly defended, but I think I can take that one if I get good rolls on the next prepared offensive, which is coming next turn. Artillery moving into place. Down here was the biggest movement, huge breakthrough. Was finally able to get rid of these defenders. Artillery have backed up. Some reinforcements, however, were able to come down from Viipuri, occupy this village hex, which is again another fortified position. And this guy has been the hero for the Finns. He's been holding out basically all game. Again, he did not surrender this position, and that is making it very hard for access to these crossroads that would let me take the coast road up to the city. So he's going to stay there. I've decided that he's going to fight to the last man and just slow this down as much as possible, force the Soviets to go up this way, where you can see another stack of big Finnish reinforcements who they rolled well on their last turn. They were able to get some coming down into this swamp area, which is going to be a nice defensive position. And last thing to consider, we are very close to a game end, which would be a Finnish victory, so I'm going to have to pull all of the Soviet guard units off the map to keep the game going. All right, so Finnish turn. I thought it might be the last turn of the game because of where we are, but this unit here tried to get out and overrun this armor. It was a 1-to-1 attack, which is actually pretty good odds on the CRT, or at least not terrible odds on this CRT because the Finns have, they take less attacker hits on most results, so it helps them counterattack. I thought maybe I could take this unit out and make a break for freedom. It turns out I couldn't, and he rolled really poorly, and so he went down, which was probably going to happen anyways. Up here, this unit locked in place. He's now out of supply. Everyone else has fallen back across into defensive positions. Definitely not a lot of way to stop the Russians once they get moving on these roads. Over here, a desperate attempt to keep this supply line open for the units. They're about to be surrounded and cut off, so they're trying to sort of caterpillar their way out of here by keeping this corridor open. On the Soviet turn, you know, if the Soviets get another turn, they're going to, you know, try and get in here and start picking units off, and that's going to leave points open for them. And at the beginning of the Soviet turn, we are at 1 on the patience track. I rolled a 4. That means the game goes one more turn. The Finns counting on the game ending in their victory, defending for just long enough, but we're going to go at least one more. And probably 2 as the Soviets end up taking the major victory point hexes along this line of defense, which will increase that by 1 if all goes according to plan. A couple more turns have gone by now. I think the biggest story is that Stalin has apparently found some patience with the breakthroughs that the Soviets have made. It's 2 turns in a row now where the roll has been beneficial to the Soviets and has allowed the game to continue, which is really bad news for the Finns. Over in the west, you can see the Soviet Army, 23rd Army, has split into 3 forces traveling up these major routes here that they can move quickly. The terrain, you can see kind of, it's closing in a little bit here on this center area with these swamps. The Finns at risk of getting surrounded and put out of supply there, so they're probably going to have to fall back at the end of this turn, even though they occupy good defensive ground. Some reinforcements who have sort of started to block the road leading into Viipuri. Up here, even though there's a lot of Soviet stacks, they don't have a ton of strength when it comes to assaulting defensive positions, and up to this point, the artillery has been kind of lagging behind to get into range during the barrage phase. They've been trying to stay protected from any Finnish counterattacks, so really just a delaying game at this point for them. And we'll see how the defense collapses as it gets closer to the city. Not great opportunities for attacks right now. I believe this is a village here, so that's double defense for the Finns. The Soviets don't want to lose too much attritionally trying to take these positions, so they're trying to flank around wherever possible. The strongest Finnish strength is in here in these swamps. And like I said, we'll see how that goes through this turn. Over here in the east, the Soviets have made great progress. The reinforcements that came down to Taipale here to prevent that, which is actually 3 points. The Soviets desperately want to take that, and then there's a small garrison here who just got bombarded with artillery on this defensive line. And then up here, sort of a final stand with the remaining infantry strength of the Finnish corps that were up here. Not a lot of strength, a lot of reduced units in here, but some artillery coming up the road. This unit here was just bombarded by artillery, but I positioned him here because there's just a clear run to 3 points. If the Soviets decide to abandon this, they can get their headquarters moving along the road and try and take that. So Finns thought the game was about to end and thought they had held out, but for the last couple of turns, the Soviets have found a second wind, and the march is on to Viipuri. So big turn for the Finns. First of all, they did roll for their final batch of reinforcements. They're going to get this game successfully, and it is a good one. Some really high quality infantry units up here, a couple of those that are really going to help, but more importantly, the German 303 Assault Gun Brigade shows up from Germany. This is by far their most powerful armor unit they've had in the game so far. And I'm hoping that it's stacked together with some other exploit capable Jaeger units. And so I'm hoping that they'll get a chance to counterattack this turn or potentially on a future turn. They're starting to coalesce the defense here in front of the main approaches to Viipuri and holding in there on these roads. The other big thing that happened just now is that the Russians lost a turn on the boss's patience. So it is conceivable that this could be the final turn of the game, and the Russians do need to make some big points. They've got to get to 20 to win by the end. If they can take that one and that one, they'll be close, although it probably won't be enough on its own. And that is a wrap. Stalin has called it on the invasion of Karelia on this final turn of the game. The final score is the Soviets 11, the Finns 28, and so victory in this game 20 points. The Finns successfully held on long enough, repelled the invasion, and got the win here. Ultimately, here's the final state of everything that went on. Russians made some pretty good ground. I think really the turning point was ultimately after this breakthrough here. There's just so much ground to cover, and the Russian infantry is so slow that just turn after turn would go by of them trying to get up there. And the Finns did a really good job of just being really annoying roadblocks in these sort of choke points and tough terrain areas. The other problem was that the Russians could never quite get their artillery to the front lines on the turns that they were able to move up, mostly because it's slow, but also just because, the Finns were constantly staying out of artillery range. And so we're able to just kind of like dig in and settle down for the next wave. So we got pretty far. This group here probably didn't have enough strength on its own to break this position, but they were certainly going to try. This one was really tough to crack. There's a village under there, so it's double defense for the Finns. So unless the artillery came through there, it was also going to be tough. This was the biggest breakthrough, just ran out of time. I would have been able to run all these guys up this line here and sort of consolidate into another front. But unfortunately, that would have been the beginning of a new slog to get through a lot of these units and then even to Viipuri up there. On the final turn, actually, the Finns did get a little bit of revenge. The German 303 Assault Gun Brigade actually came down, did an overrun attack on this stack, which was in this hex, and actually caused a loss and retreat. So it was fun to go on offense with them with a powerful unit for once. And then over here, I think maybe the mistake that was made was splitting this army to take this 3-point spot here. I think in retrospect, had I recognized the situation over in this part of the map, I probably would have left this alone because there's a lot of rivers and bad terrain, the defensive wall in here, to bring enough power to bear against it, and they were basically fully depleted. They were never going to get through there with the defense that it's got in it. So I probably would have, if I had done things differently, I probably would have moved them up this area here, kind of held this crossroads, and then pushed on to try and get the 3 points over there. Obviously, the Finn reinforcements sort of responded to my move as well, but a lot more ground to cover that might have been more successful to link up with the rest of the army. Final thoughts. Overall, I really like it. Standard combat system, one of my favorites. It plays really quickly. Really low impact on the rules, but still you get a nice feel for, the conflict and the force abilities of each side. I think the strong attacker-defender dichotomy is like a nice puzzle to try and figure out. If you really like defending or, creating, roadblocks and stymieing another player, the Finns in this game have a real challenge on their hands to do it well, but it's incredibly fun if you can figure it out. Shepherding and husbanding your artillery so that they're always firing twice a turn, or once on this in the reaction phase and once on their turn. You can really do a lot of damage to the Soviets to slow them down. And in general, there's a lot of good spots, especially in the south here, where you can take up really tough positions to get through, and the Russians have to really commit to spending lots of time to get around you or trying to take attrition to push through you. And if you can get the reinforcements, you can have some fun with the Germans as well. So overall, I'm not sure if this game is out of print, or I'm sure you can probably still find it for pretty cheaply and affordably, but a really fun, different version of other SCS titles. You don't have the sweeping panzer movements like you would in the East Front, and it's not super huge. It's a single map, counter density, mostly artillery. I would say it's moderately dense. It's mostly artillery, but not a ton to manage, especially as the Finns. So their turns went pretty quickly. I would definitely say that, if you're a fan of sort of more maneuver warfare, and, using overruns effectively, this is probably not the game that you're going to get that in. The terrain is just so close and so dense, and there's so many defensive positions that can't be overrun. And then combined with the fact that there's not a lot of exploit capable units on either side, it's definitely going to be more of a slog than an outright fist fight. But, certainly something different as far as SCS goes. I really like it. I would definitely recommend this if you like hex and counter games and you want something on a topic that is not often gamed. It's got a good flavor for that. Thumbs up.